Friends, in this lesson, we will learn about the control flow. Okay, how can we manage the control flow of our application? So first, there are conditionals. Okay, so for conditionals, we have if else and switch case. Okay, so if else is very similar to most of the programming languages. So we have the if keyword, then a condition. If the condition is basically an expression that returns either true or false, or truthy value or the falsy value. If the condition returns a truthy value, this statement will be executed. Else, it will check for another condition. If that returns a truthy value, the statement would be executed. Else, so on. Okay, so it's very simple. You may try these out on your local and experiment with it. Similarly, we have switch case. Okay, so here we have the switch keyword and then a variable. Okay, any variable, and then we check this variable for different values. So we use the case keyword, and you know uh, we check for a value, and if that's true, the statement is executed and we break out. Else, we check for another value. The statement is executed, we break out, and we can provide a default. Okay, this is like very simple. Nothing, not worth spending too much time. You can, of course, just copy the code and practice it a little. So here, basically, we have a skill level. Okay, so skill level can either be beginner, intermediate, advanced, or expert. So we are using this variable here. And in case the skill level is beginner, then we log out a number. Okay. In case the skill level is intermediate, we log out a number and break out because we don't need to check further. In case the skill level is advanced, then we again log out a number and break out. And if none of them is true, then we have a default value here. As simple as that. Okay, so here, since the skill level is beginner, we can see that 45,000 is logged out. What if it's advanced? Okay, what if it's advanced? We will see that 1 lakh is logged out. Okay, just play around it with it a little bit if you need to, and you would be comfortable with it. Next, for control flow, we have different kinds of loops in JavaScript, and we use them a lot. Okay, so better get comfortable with it. So loops are used to repeat an action for a number of time, right? So for example, if I need to log hello world, this is a way to log it. What if I want to log it 5 times? Okay, we want to repeat this action 5 times. So a bad way of doing this is repeating this code 5 times, but it will work. We will get hello world 5 times, right? But there's a better way to repeat action over and over, and we have several ways of doing that in JavaScript. We have a for loop, we have a while loop, we have a do while loop, we have a for in loop, and we have a for off loop. It's important to be very comfortable and confident with these loops, so I'll spend a little bit of time here. Okay, so for loop takes in an initial expression, then a condition expression, and an increment expression, and then finally the statements, which will be executed in every iteration or every enumeration. Okay, so what can we do is we can, for the same example, logging hello world 5 times, we can use the for loop. Okay, so the first argument is the initial expression. Okay, this is the initial expression. Then we have a conditional expression. We want this loop to run until I is less than 5. And we want to increment I by 1 in every iteration. Okay, we are incrementing I by 1 in every iteration. So friends, for the first iteration, the value of I is the initial expression. Then in the second iteration, it is incremented by 1. This is one thing. Another important thing to note is that this condition expression is checked even for the very first iteration, friends. So for example, if I starts with 6, okay, the condition does not holds true, right? Because we are in the conditional, in this condition expression, we are saying that the loop should run until I is less than 5, never after I is equal to or greater than 5. So since this condition does not hold true, this loop won't even run once. Okay, so this is an important thing to note, that this condition is checked even for the very first iteration, friends. Okay, so two things we learned, that in the first iteration this initial value is used, in rest of the iterations it is incremented depending on the increment expression. And second thing about for loop is that this condition is checked even for the very first iteration. If it does not hold true, it won't execute, even the statement won't be executed even once. Okay, another thing, very simple, that if the same thing is repeated again and again in the console, you will see this number. Okay, if you see 5 before hello world, that means there are 5 hello worlds here. And Chrome is trying to save some real estate by giving us a number of count, okay, instead of printing it 5 times. So this is something to keep in mind. Then we have a while loop. So something that is immediately obvious, which makes it very different from the for loop, is that the counter. So here the loop counter is a part of the for loop. It's inside the for loop, right? In the for loop. But in while loop, the counter is external variable. Okay, so it's external to the, so this is while loop, and we have an external counter for the while loop. Okay, so while checks for condition, it executes the statement if the condition is passed, and then we are responsible for incrementing the external loop counter. Okay, and then again the condition is checked until the condition holds true, the statement keeps running. Okay, so an example would be something like this, friends. So basically I is initialized with 0. Okay, and in while, even for the first statement to run, it's checked, the condition is checked. If the condition returns true or a truthy value, the statement is executed. I is incremented by 1, so now I becomes 1. It again checks the condition and it keeps running. Okay, so we get the exact same result, but this time with an external counter and the while loop. So difference between for and while loop is, apart from syntax, basically it has an external loop counter. Something that is very different from while and for loop is a do while loop. Okay, friends, do while loop uh, is very different. It has an external loop counter, but the condition is below. Condition is below towards the end. So friends, what makes do while a lot different is that the the statement will be executed once. It is guaranteed to execute at least once, even if the condition does not hold true. Even if the condition returns a falsy value, the statement would be executed at least once. Okay, so we have do first, so it does something and then checks. Okay, does something and then checks. So the statement is executed at least once. So here in this example, basically I'm checking for I to be less than 1, and I'm basically looking for prime numbers, and it's simple. You can play around with it if you want to. So what makes do while loop difference is just that the statement will be executed at least once. Then friends, for in and for off. For in is used to iterate over properties of an object or elements of an array. Let's check this. So we have an object here. Okay, let's comment out the array for once. And here we have the same for keyword, but we don't have those initial expressions and conditions and all of those. Okay, so whenever JavaScript finds this in keyword inside the parenthesis after for, it treats it as a for in loop. Okay, and the syntax is we have a loop counter, which is key here, and we have an object here. And what it will do for us is it will loop over I'll just comment out this to make it more obvious. It will loop over each property of the object and give us the key. Okay, it loops over each property of an object and gives us the key. So we have first name, rank, and age. We have first name, rank, and age. If we have the object, if we have the key, we can get the value using either the dot operator or the box brackets. So this is object, and we are using box brackets and the key. So this basically means student first name for the first iteration. For the second iteration, this means students rank, and for the third iteration, it means students age. Okay, and we get back our values 1. So first name is Vivek, rank is 1, and age is 36. Okay, so this way we get back the keys and values. This is for in loop with object. Now for in loop with arrays. So what happens here is that it gives us back the index. Okay, so so actually, yeah, this is interesting. So subjects is an array. So if I just check subjects, so you will see that it looks somewhat like an object. So it has this index here, which is 0, which looks like a key, and the value here, which element here, which looks like a value. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, and you can see here that when you're using for in loop for an array, we get back these keys. Okay, 0, 1, 2. Okay, and in reference to an array, these keys are simply the the index. So we are using index. It has nothing to do with index here. Okay, it can be any variable. It can be a, for example, and we will get 0, 1, 2. And similar to objects, we can get the value using the array and the key. Okay, so we can get back we see the item at 0 index is JavaScript. 0 index is JavaScript. The item at first index is HTML. The item at the third index is CSS. Okay, so we are able to loop over the items or the elements of an array or objects using for in loop. Okay, friends? So using for in loop, we are able to iterate over either the properties of an object or the elements of an array. For of loop is specific to iterators. An array is an iterable value. Okay. What are iterators? We will look into it. It's a very important concept, and I think every JavaScript developer should know the concept of iterators, and we will look into it. And for now, it's sufficient for us to know that for of loop is for iterating over arrays. Okay. And when we are not concerned about the index, okay, it just gives us back each element one by one. So for the same example, if we use the for of loop, so we have this simple little array, okay, subjects, and we use the for of loop to enumerate it. So we directly get each element. Okay, so in subject, it can be anything, right? So I decided to give it subject of subjects, and I can directly log subject here. So if I copy the for in loop as well, so essentially for arrays, for in was giving us index, and we use that index to get our element. Okay, so it was a two-step process when working with for in. But when we use for of loop for this array, for this iterable value array, we directly get each element in every iteration. Okay, so this is a subtle difference between for in and for of. Objects are not iterables. All the objects are not iterables. Okay, of course we can make an object iterable. We will look into it. How can we make an object iterable in the lessons to come? But arrays are iterables by default, and we can use for of loop in arrays to enumerate it, to loop over it. Okay, so for of loop. So we have learned about all of the loops. We have learned about for loop, while loop, do while loop, for in, and for of. 5 of them. Another thing we need to learn, we need to be aware of, is the break and continue keywords. Okay. So break jumps out of the entire loop. We use break when we want to jump out of the entire loop. And we use continue when we want to jump out of the current iteration and move to the next iteration. Okay, so the next iteration will continue. Okay, it will continue, but break will just break out of the entire loop. So this is something to be aware of. Okay, so this is all about loops, and I hope you feel much more confident about loops now. And of course, nothing can replace practice. So you have this notes, just copy it, paste it, create your own object, and try to to loop over it. Try to enumerate it using the for in loop, for example. And that is the only way to get good at anything, by just practicing it. Okay. I hope this lesson was very useful for all of you.